All right. Welcome to the Sweet Science of Fighting podcast. Today we have TK. Welcome, TK.
Oh man, thank you for having me, mate. It was good. It was good to meet in person actually, like a couple weeks ago. So it was nice to actually meet in person for once after maybe 2 years now, or something like that.
Yeah, probably even longer. I mean, we were on the phone when I was still in Romania talking about some of the dumbass jobs coming up. Yeah, for sure. So ran into TK at the UFC PI when I was there. TK is now working with Gavin Pratt as part of the S&C department. So we've had Gavin Pratt on the podcast too, if anyone wants to go back into the archives a bit and check out what he's doing there. But maybe for the listeners, TK, you want to give a brief background about yourself?
Yeah. I've had more jobs and T-shirts at this point. I've worked in so many sports. Working in
typical
baseball.
S&C coach then.
Yeah. Then worked in rugby over in Japan and in the UK. I lived in London for 2 years. Worked in boxing, worked in basketball, professional soccer. So I just kind of bounced around these last. I think I've been coaching now for 8 years. So I just bounced around a lot of different sports, but it's all been good. Like I would say, it's probably in reality, it's probably hindered me in some respects, like within the U.S. job market in that sense, because the U.S. tends to be very tied to your sport. You're this sports guy, you're that kind of sport guy.
Yeah.
But overall, it's nothing but good things to me, information and knowledge wise. For one, I'm able to meet a lot of coaches from a variety of different sports, like yourself. Like me, you met. I was trying to get back. I was trying to go back into rugby, and then I think also it puts you in different scenarios, different constraints, and it forces you to learn and be more adaptable, as opposed to being stuck in I just do this, I just do that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny here. In the States, it would be almost impossible for, say, you and I to get into American football, at least from my perspective, just because it's almost like you got to start there and just stay there. You know?
Yeah, 100%. Like my friends who work on college football or the NFL, they've pretty much only worked in that sport their entire career. They may have had they worked at a smaller university. They may have had other sports they were responsible for, but their main sport was just American football. So it's just you're in, you're out, you're out.
Yeah, there's plenty of sports like that within the space. But let's jump into maybe some of your, obviously you're at the UFC PI now, working with MMA athletes. And I know you also have a manual with William Wayland, who eventually I will get on the podcast. Actually, might get you to link me up with him to do that too. Sure. But focusing on rotational power for essentially rotational sports. Obviously, golf, cricket, baseball, fighting all kind of have that similar element to it. So do you want to maybe jump into strength power training to improve that rotational element in combat sports?
Yeah, definitely. So, kind of the ebook, the part 1 and 2, Wayland and I wrote with, we call it Big Hitters Manual. So, at the time I was working in baseball mainly, or with the Astros, and Wayland having a brother experience in MMA and combat sports, but also working in golf. And what you kind of see is that I think it gets a bit bastardized now. People think, to do rotational power, so strength and power work, you have to do tons of rotational work, and you just do tons of and even a lot of general rotation work isn't actually rotation. It's people just do pal-off holds to their breast desk and just I'll rotate better. It's you're not even rotating. You're doing anti-rotation exercise. But a lot also starts that force in that ground kind of starts at the ground, starts at the feet. And so being able to create vertical force output is where it kind of begins at, and then it upstreams and upchains from a synchronization perspective through that trunk and that core and the hip. But if you don't produce force from the ground up, you're starting 2 steps behind essentially. And some of it was data we kind of looked at while at the Astros. We saw our guys who hit the ball the farthest, the hardest, guys with we call it exit velocity, so basically the velocity back the ball comes off the bat. Guys who were hitting 110 miles per hour plus off the bat happened to be the strongest. The guys who were the strongest in the lower body power and strength perspective. From looking at the force stats, it correlated with their concentrated impulse. The higher that overall concentrated impulse was, then the harder that it hit the ball when they hit it. And then so the constant impulse at 100 milliseconds as well, but the speed of their reduction of force was a bit messier, and it's because it actually takes a bit longer than people think. Because people only ever see the end point. They see the output. They see the rotational aspect and the contact with the bat, or something with a kick or a punch. But for forgetting about like basically how long it takes for that force, you're driving that force from the ground and digging your feet into dirt, mat, canvas, what have you, and that's kind of where that force starts at, as you create that force through your feet into the ground up. So if you lack some of that, like pure just lower body strength and power, and it's not set to the cell where it's just like, hey, like you kind of just got to get stronger. But it does work in that sense, like it's stronger, more powerful. And then obviously there's of course a technical element that's part of it. Like if you have terrible mechanics, like you be as strong and powerful as you want, it's not going to help. But if you have base strength and power, and your mechanics and your technique is where it needs to be technically and tactically, then you have a better shot.
Yeah. There's actually a great critical review that just came out this month in boxers showing boxers that essentially punch harder, have greater lower body strength. I was literally reading that paper like last night, actually.
Oh,
there we go. Perfect preparation. Yeah. So that it's another interesting take as well. And then regarding, I guess it's an easy low-hanging fruit within fighters, because I guess most fighters generally don't develop strength in the gym. They're kind of just doing whatever it is. But is there a way to maybe decipher if a fighter needs more rotation training versus maybe lower body strength, or vice versa?
Mm-hmm. I think some from talking to like the technical coaches and also watching a bit of how they fight, especially when it's like MMA, whereas you have a variety of different backgrounds. Some people start from kickboxing, Muay Thai background, others come from a grappling background. I think you can almost sometimes look at the phenomenology of it, of like someone who is coming from a wrestling or jiu-jitsu background probably struggles to rotate more because they tend to not have to get in those kind of positions, like if that's their background or training. So they tend to be fine with like general strength and power because of the nature of those sports. And so you think you have to add in some more, even things of like overloaded gastro cable rotations, like old school style with like a rope or whatever, or a handle, and actually adding weight on it and not just doing a pal off hold. Doing things like rotational med ball work and trying to teach them to rotate into that hip or rotate through that trunk. I think from a phenomenology perspective, that's probably where that comes in the most. I find is that usually our guys who are wrestling, jiu-jitsu background, grappling backgrounds tend to struggle a bit more with that, like especially trying to sync it up, as opposed to the guys who are striking background guys tend to lack more of that general strength and power in. They tend to be kind of elastic, but they can usually rotate pretty well because they have to, from their ability to create that force. And then when we speak to technical coaches, you watch how they strike in a controlled setting. You kind of get that kind of viewpoint as well. So that is a nice part about the PI, is that even though a lot of guys, I'm going to say, they don't do a lot of the training here, as like you saw, and I'm sure Gavin talked about. They'll still come up here and do some training. So a lot of times you can just hang out upstairs and see guys like hitting a bag or hitting mitts and stuff like that, and kind of get an idea of where you could potentially sprinkle in some other exercises that could probably help them from a rotational perspective if they lack some of that.
Yeah. I guess from a personal standpoint, how much time in terms of when you're training rotation do you spend doing almost like full body rotation where you're allowing the hips to move in sequence of the rotation versus just fixing the legs and hips where they are and just having the upper body rotate? Do you have like a preference there?
Yeah, for me, I usually regress it to just the upper body rotating first. That way we can teach that dissociation very early on. And we'll go like extensive if it's med ball work, or like loaded with like cables, things like that, or even like the big heavy med balls that have guys sit and just like literally doing rotating like trunk work with while holding those. And then vice versa, like progressing it into adding the legs into that movement and getting that force from the ground so they can feel that, and then synchronizing that up.
Gotcha. Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I like that idea of having almost starting from that heavy loaded force, isolate that upper body, and then moving into more, I guess, sequencing of being able to put everything together. Yeah. Allowing the hips to move, and then getting the hips to move, I guess, with the upper body. Yeah. Almost, I don't want to say simulating a strike, but I guess you could say, yeah. Do you have any, like, I guess you could say special strength exercises regarding maybe rotational stuff that you like that maybe, I don't know, transfers well over to striking in MMA or boxing or whatever it is?
I think probably some of the business I've done is like med ball, basically having a partner throw it to you to catch it in a first set force. To me, it's like similar to as close as you get to like upper body plyometric without having like the like old school kind of like isokinetic type machines that you kind of see some like guys like Speed of Sport and stuff like that use. Which they actually do, like, think those are viable, but you can go into the rotational aspect. But from a med ball perspective, and like kind of that SDE kind of exercise, I do like partner tosses, stuff like that. You have to catch and reverse that force, whether it be from a shot put stance, from the hip, and things like that. I find that's like a good way to like kind of overload those patterns with like some over speedy centric having to catch it and then like reverse that force.
Nice. Do you do both sides when you do that? For example, you're doing cross or rear hand throw.
Yeah.
Are you then doing maybe lead hand jab mid ball toss there, or are you just reversing and doing cross both sides?
I usually just reverse it and do cross both sides, basically from orthodox and a southpaw stance. I've never actually thought about doing it from like if I'm doing like from a cross and like a jab. I may try that actually.
Yeah,
I'll try it myself and see if I can catch the ball in the first place.
Yeah, it might be hard with a partner throwing it to you, but I guess if you have a small enough medicine ball, maybe you can hold it in a hand.
Yeah.
Or those sandbags, or somewhere that could work too. So maybe a new fighter comes in to see you because I think they get assigned to you guys when they come in.
Mm-hmm.
How do you then determine what a fighter needs as part of the preparation? Say they're out of fight camp, their fight's a while away now, and that's I guess for anyone listening as well. Maybe if I know you guys have a lot of tech there to be able to profile things, so maybe if you run through that, but then maybe if you run through as well the amateur fighter who doesn't have that kind of tech, how can they determine what they need?
Yeah. So I would say when the first, especially if I get like a day or two to notice that someone's news coming in, I'll try to go and watch like at least 2 or 3 of their fights, kind of get an idea kind of how they kind of fight. So I think it can help kind of shape some of that language too when you're trying to connect the dots for them. And then we'll run we have a battery of tests from like strength and power perspective, but also an ESD perspective. From a strength and power perspective, it's counter move and jump is a big one for me, just to get an understanding of how they produce force. And that's like with like hands spaced on their hips. And then we do like a load of velocity kind of profile we're working on where like we take a counter move and jump velocity, we then add 10% of the body weight, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 if they're a male, and then cut off a 50 if they're a woman. And then landmine punch throw, which is also like a progression of load as well. Like so start with just an empty bar, it's like 5 kilos, 10 kilos, or starts with 5 kilos on the bar into 10, 15 based on their weight class. Into a isometric mid thigh pull. Now that's actually now that like rack is kind of fixed. We do like a isometric mid thigh pull, a neck profile as well, and then we can do a grip test. We have a few other like kind of tests like 10-5 hops and stuff like that. Those are kind of the big 4, like the neck, landmine punch throw, isometric mid thigh pull, and a counter move and jump. And then that kind of gives us a general idea of where someone's at. Whether you look at from a dynamic strength index perspective, where they lack some more ballistic abilities, where they lack some more isometric strength work, things like that. So it kind of gives us a good like gamut, and then we can kind of look at from upper body perspective. And also the neck is like 4 directions: flexion, extension, left and right, lateral. And so then we use that kind of data from a strength and power to determine a little bit of, okay, there's some things you might need to work on. Like maybe they lack matching strength, so the first part of our program will be geared towards those things. And then they'll do the ESD assessment, which is like matched elastic power, all on an air bike, matched elastic power, matched like limited power, and then aerobic power. So essentially almost like a repeat sprint test, but it's only 3 reps, and matched elastic, matched athletic, long duration sprint, and aerobic power, just like basically a step DOT match test. And then between all those assessments, which is obviously a lot, so it's a nice point. Nice if they can if there's someone who's going to be involved and be into the program for like a decent amount of time, like they're going to be around in Vegas or based in Vegas for like 6, 7, 8 weeks. And if they're not, then we try to get all those things done within maybe 10 days or so. And so we can send them all that information as well, and they'll do like a remote program for myself or whoever is programming for them.
Gotcha.
And I kind of always go with, the reason I think watching their fights is really important and speaking to them about how they fight is that it gives you an idea, not only from a selling point perspective, but you know, I always go with like, you never want to take away what made them elite. So like if someone's a high pressure, high volume fighter, it's like that's the thing that got them into the UFC. They should probably still fucking do that thing. Like it doesn't mean, and so I split it doesn't mean we don't train a lactic system or glycolate system, things like that. Or doesn't mean we don't train, you know, strength and power. They may need those things, but as you get closer to the fight, you have to trim some of those things down and then make basically their strength, their superpower, and just not worry about their kryptonite at that point. That's always my selling point. Of like, okay, if we're 16 weeks out, whatever. Like you don't have a fight booked at all. We're gonna focus on the things that you're bad at, and then I was like, then we'll just maintain like your qualities that have made you elite. But once you get within that 10-week, 8-week mark, even it's not even 12 weeks, depending on who it is and kind of the training age of that fighter, it's like let's focus on the superpower because that's what's gonna win the fight more likely. It's gonna be a high volume fighter. It's because they're gonna win because they're gonna break their opponent. If they're someone who's not that, and they're like explosive, all it takes is one shot, but they don't have many fucking bullets in the chamber. Like then it's okay. We just have to make you robust enough to survive, just in case it goes past maybe second, third round.
Past the first 30 seconds.
Yeah. But as it goes to the fight, like we'll just work on being powerful and fast. So much because if you land the one, the person's going to sleep. So let's get to that point.
Yeah, so I guess an example, let's just say Nate Diaz has verbally has a fight coming up in the future. So say if you had Nate Diaz, we'll just take, obviously don't know his stats, whatever, but he's a high pressure, high volume fighter. So it means out of camp, maybe you'd prioritize his strength power work there, and then as you get closer, then you'll be looking more at just, hey, endurance and stuff is your thing. That's what we're going to do to make you feel good and everything, but you're still going to sprinkle a little bit of that strength power in there. Yeah,
exactly. And just sprinkle a little bit just to try to maintain as much of those kind of qualities as possible. But yeah, the more as you're closer, it's like, hey, let's keep the main thing.
Yeah, nice. And then you also mentioned with the counter movement jump test, you did loaded. So I think it was 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% body weight. What do you do with that data?
So basically, try to put them on, form a bit of a quadrant of where they fall with from explosive strength, they're elastic, weak, stuff like that. But almost creating like another version of a dynamic strength index, almost like you would with the IMTP, essentially. That's still very much in like in early stages. We're sort of collecting like a breadth of data from various fighters within that test. I think that one was only started doing maybe 2 months before I got here. I want to say they added that one. Yeah.
Okay, so relatively new. Gotcha. So maybe someone listening to this, they don't have force plates, gym awares, everything else to do all these tests. Is there anything they can do, say, maybe at their local gym, at home in their garage, something they can do to maybe it doesn't have to be a test to help them prescribe something. It could be, maybe because they don't have whatever equipment, but it could be a test maybe to help them monitor their progress and things like that. So it's anything that you would recommend for an MMA fighter to do in that situation?
From a pure equipment perspective, like if you want one thing that I think was gonna add a lot of value to someone's training potentially, I think some kind of like VBT tool is quite nice to have. And like I wouldn't say necessarily use a push band, no offense to push, but like I'd probably go with a.
I think push band's gone, isn't it? Haven't they fully?
Oh, they went
stopped making it.
Shit.
I'm pretty sure they went under.
Oh fuck!
Yeah, I'm pretty sure push went under.
They probably need to. Sure. But I would probably do like a company out of Spain called Vitru. I really like that. Just like they're like $300 something like that, and like you can apps on your phone. To me, it's just like a gym aware. Like I said, it's not $10,000, and you don't have to send it. Great, you don't have to send it back to Australia. It's always nice. And so I think I tend just so then you can like kind of get a track if you're training. You can do higher intensity, high CNS strength work without having to worry about injuring yourself by doing a 1 hour match test. And it's like, oh, okay, if we're in that, if it's a squat or a deadlift, and we're in that 0.4 below range, like it's a high CNS, high stressful activity. You're close to 1 IM. You kind of can program prescribe off of that. And we want to look at peak velocity on a jump. We can do that by attaching it to a dial. So I think from a pure perspective, that and a heart rate monitor, like I think would cover 99% of things you could really need to do, or like even like would recommend doing from a training perspective. And I think from a lot of perspectives, probably the heart rate monitor is probably the almost more valuable one. because some of your training doesn't have it's like not intense that it's not really a massive deal at all. And that as long as you're just like consistently training, consistently kind of building your volume and intensity, like you'll kind of get to where I find most fighters probably need to be at. As long as you're consistent about it and not doing the kind of stereotypical thing of train when I'm in camp, and then once I'm out of camp, I'm not chilling. I'm just chilling now.
You're just chilling.
Yeah, so I think so.
Just hitting the pads a few times a week.
Yeah, exactly. So I think as long as you keep consistent training, you probably for a while anyway, probably don't necessarily even need to really test that much or assess your program. So as long as you're just consistent 2 or 3 times a week, boom, maybe it's full body at a time, like you're gonna cover a lot of bases and be ahead of a lot of people in that sense. Because a lot of people don't do that.
People don't rate consistency. Consistency is huge.
Yeah.
Like you can do very little consistently and make huge gains just over time just because you're doing it all the time. This is the person who, as you mentioned, chills in the off season between fights and comes back in.
Yeah, then you're always working from a step behind because now you're not unfit.
Yeah, exactly. With another velocity-based training device is VMAX Pro out of the Netherlands. That's another good one. We've got that one. Same thing, works in an app, just goes on the bar. So that's another option for anyone listening as well. But do you want to maybe dive a little bit into the velocity-based training? You obviously mentioned, hey, under 0.4 meters per second. You're looking at maybe more maximal strength. So do you want to maybe talk about average versus peak velocity when you'd use each of those, maybe with what people are doing, and then maybe just some very general guidelines around velocity bands in terms of maybe what you're looking at. You know, you mentioned obviously 0.4 and under, you're looking at maximal strength, maybe what some of the other ones are.
Yeah. So I really like the basically like VBT is using drop off sets, stuff like that, especially for like higher velocity endpoints. So I tend to usually just like average velocity for the set. Sometimes like you use peak, well, as you know, within set it can kind of vary a little bit. Like a lot of times your first 2 reps are usually like almost your slowest reps of a set. Like and
gotta find the groove.
Yeah, exactly. So then I'll go into that dynamic effort work at that 0.75 and like faster. Like most of my VBT, which I get from like Dan Baker and like Brian Mann, and doing things like that. And so you're taking the average velocity across a set. You do things like drop offs as well, like knowing when to cut a set, like whether it be a 10% drop off, 5% drop off, 7, things of that nature. So use that dynamic effort stuff. I'll either use it in like a contrast setting with like some higher intensity strength, or probably not as low as 0.4, 0.3. Usually be like 0.5. 0.5 tends to be like a good strength stimulus. Yep. Sometimes 0.6.
Is that average velocity over the whole set then that you're looking at? That
over that set. So if it's like 4 sets of 6 or whatever, okay, so we want every set to be within that 0.5 range, or 0.5 or 0.6 really, 0.62 to like 0.5. Like 0.5 is like a low, and like if our last set's 0.5 average, like okay, we've done like a good work, good amount of work here. But there's that middle zone of like that kind of 0.6-ish to like 0.7, where if you're doing some very high volume work, like you can get a lot of reps in, and that can be pretty brutal, especially if you're doing like off of that stuff. But it tends to be kind of where I operate in of like that 0.45 to 0.6, 0.58 range in terms of like strength work, so like true strength work. Maximal 0.4 and below, because that's when it gets grindy, and then dynamic effort like 0.75 pretty much, and like faster. And anything that's usually above a 1, it's like above a 1 or 1.02, 03, it's you're just jumping like.
No, so. With the velocity drop-offs, obviously you're looking set to set there. You're looking at velocity drop-offs within the set too.
I'll do like velocity drop-off. I'll do within the set. Like I'll set it. You can do this on a Vitu as well, but you're doing gym where you'll set within like, oh, okay, I want 10% drop-off, so the set doesn't end until we get a 10% drop-off. If you're doing like some high volume power work or like some repeat power, repeat speed, but you can do a drop-off with strength work and like strength work and volume work, and that shit is fucking brutal. Like, because you'll go, there's like those you tend to do like 15 to 20% drop off, and you're doing a set of 12 with like. There's actually I just reviewed a paper this month for Science of Sport, and they compared 0% drop offs, 15%, 25, and 50% velocity drop off for like strength and hypertrophy, and obviously they had 50% drop off, brutal, mean for hypertrophy, but like just
everything else just hit the gutter.
Yeah.
But when you're going that much volume, people just getting jacked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly that. So that's something that people can be aware of. I guess one use of using a velocity-based training device, having those bands. So then are you using average velocity as your main metric, regardless of the exercise?
I probably say I tend to, unless I'm looking at like, if I want, actually, I'm looking at like maybe jumps, I'd probably go more towards the peak velocity end. I don't tend to, unless it's like a weighted jump, like I don't tend to do VBT for a weighted jump. Somebody's always gonna move a certain. Also, I want a drop off, but I tend to mainly do drop offs for like maybe like a speed squat, a speed trap bar deadlift.
Okay.
It's more dynamic effort exercises. And if someone's a bit more advanced, and I'll do things like a jump squat with a drop off set like that. But I found like this population tends to not be as needed. Like someone kind of play around with. I was working in baseball and working in rugby, doing like jump squats with like a drop off set and stuff.
Nice. Yeah, it's especially when you're maybe an individual athlete, it's quite easy to implement. Obviously, with a team, it's a bit harder. But so, if anyone listening, if you're training by yourself or a couple of people, it's something you can definitely do.
Yeah.
Attach your velocity-based device to the bar, set a threshold, and you can do whatever your set is, and it ends once you basically lose 10% of that max velocity that you've been training. That's one good way to minimize fatigue and maximize power as well. So, that's a great way of doing things too. And maybe let's dive into a little bit more of the strength power stuff as well. Because on this podcast recently, I've had a lot of conditioning talk. I guess a lot of fighters, they just want cardio, conditioning, got to make sure they don't gas up. Obviously, the strength power work also transfers over to that. Obviously, if you can do things at lower percentages of your maximum force capabilities, blah, 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 it can be a lot easier. So let's maybe dive into a little bit of kind of, we know how you program, I guess, regarding the tests and things like that, but maybe differences between out of camp gym work and then coming into the camp. And then let's also jump into as well, closer to the fight, like 2 weeks out. What are you doing there to kind of taper into the fight as well?
Yeah. So I'll say out of camp, like more like is to have a bit more volume if we have like place for, especially if they're doing less technical work, a bit more volume of training overall. Like trying to hit some potential, like they gain like overall muscle, general GPP, maybe hit some different kind of movement patterns they don't normally hit, sprinkle in bits of like mobility that's necessary as well. And then as we get kind of that more, as we're close to the camp, we'll definitely drop the volume back, like a fair amount. Like we're just chasing intensity to maintain, so that we can still like gain some strength and power, but also know that we're not worry about the volume as much, because the nature of MMA and just martial arts in general, because of the class structure of it, and a lot of times you don't really know what's occurring, and like in terms of volume training and stuff like that, and those sessions, which is fine, but you have to be like aware of that from like an S&C perspective. Like a lot of martial arts schools tend to be very high volume of training. Like tend to be, I mean, if you're doing, if I was doing 4 or 5 hours, 4 or 5 sets, I've heard as much as 8 to 10 hours of training, like of martial arts MMA work within a 2-day span. It's like you probably shouldn't do 12 to 15. Like in your training, I don't need 15 exercises either. It's like you can stick to really 4 to 6 exercises, chase some higher qualities, allow a bit of rest between sets, and chase some higher intensity, which that we maintain that strength and power, especially because there is that weight descent factor as well. Like you have players who also especially during camp, starting to lose a pound or maybe even 2 pounds a week, depending on how heavy they are and how aggressive the weight cut is going to be. And so now they have a weight. Now their the tank is basically being drained by the technical training. Also, they're slightly underfed. And then now you're like, all right, here's a shit ton of volume of lifting weights. It's like something eventually has to give. So you take away decrease the volume by a lot. You chase some intensity, chase some high intensity sets of 3s, 4s, 5s. Maybe it's across 4 or 5 sets, decent amount of rest, but maintain that higher percentage of load. So we can still train those qualities to a decent level while that weight's coming down, and it's still getting like some high threshold motor unit recruitment going on, as opposed to like smashing with more volume in the middle of camp. And as you get closer to that end stage, now it's more higher speed work. It looks more almost like kind of like peaking. Like I quite like the Plyometric stuff William Whalen does, and the oscillatory work that in the peaking kind of phase that like Cal D's kind of talks about. I think that can have a lot of volume. I think in a lot of ways that some of that stuff has more value in MMA as opposed to doing like depth jumps or like a bunch of pogos and like that. Like your foot just doesn't interact with the floor like that. And MMA, like you produce force fast with your feet still be on the ground, as opposed to we think like traditional like team sport where there's a sprinting factor or a jumping factor. So we don't really have that in combat sports. So really, you're probably better off having your feet pinned to the ground and doing like more oscillatory work, whether it be speed squat, speed Zertra, speed deadlifts, things like that, where they're interacting with the floor but still producing at a very high speed. It's kind of what generally kind of looks like from a. But probably the biggest thing is I cut the volume down.
Yeah. That's through the taper period, those last 2 weeks, is it?
Yeah.
Where you look to cut the volume down. But
yeah. Well, even like within, even still like 8 weeks out, like we're going to 2 to 3 sessions a week, and even still that volume then is actually still pretty low from an S&C perspective, at least from a strength and power perspective, because now we're just chasing like high intensity work. And then like high threshold, you're trying to recruit high threshold motor units and maintain and gain a bit of strength and power as there's a weight descent occurring. The technical work is through the roof. They're sparring maybe 2 times a week. And some gyms spar really hard. Some don't really spar very hard. Some don't really spar at all. You just don't really know.
Yeah. So how does fight week and the week before fight week look then regarding strength and power work?
Fight week, I mean, so far we tend to not. Most guys don't tend to do much on fight week in terms of S&C perspective, which is perfectly fine. Like, I don't blame them. Fucking hungry and shit. Like the last thing you want to do is fucking. Yes. And then, but usually the week before is when we kind of start to do a lot of those kind of like more peaking type of work. And if there's a level of like just a general kind of calorie burn that they probably need. If they're maybe stuck at a point, whatever, from a weight perspective, maybe you do some like the long duration kind of aerobic work that's just boring and just need to just tick away, or you do some like maybe a bit more like lactic power interval work or heavy glycolytic work just to get some just mean like 2 weeks out. But usually the week of is not. Like, there's a couple who will come in, but most don't come in the week of.
Gotcha. You mentioned about the plyometric rods. I found that concept interesting. I mean, I think William actually posted about it maybe a few years ago now, about the idea that obviously in combat sports, as you mentioned, you don't have these very short ground contact times. Maybe in amateur boxing when they're bouncing around the ring and stuff like that. But if we gear this towards maybe MMA, even grappling and wrestling, you don't have these very short ground contact times, even though you may need to produce force relatively quickly, maybe if you're throwing striking combinations or shooting takedowns, whatever. So I guess maybe do you want to give your perspective on that? How much are you using plyometrics that often then with fighters because of that? And are you using other methods instead? Or are plyometrics still in your program and for what reason?
So jump stuff still in my program for sure, just because a big part I think there's like a second order effect from like a strength and power perspective because of that eccentric loading. Like I tend to avoid things like box jumps because I'm getting a lot of concentrating output, but I'm getting very little like eccentric loading perspective, which I think you then need to get you need the eccentric loading to get the full kind of gamut and full adaptation from doing jump work. So I'll still do a fair amount of jump work from a tendon health perspective, tendon elasticity perspective. So there's a level of elasticity that has to occur, especially because you're still producing force from the floor. And so I think it helps. It's really viable in teaching them to produce force. But I personally don't go to like the extreme ends. Like we'll do some repeat jump work, but we also will do like kind of Plyometric isolatory work as well. But I don't go to things. I don't see the value necessarily in doing things like depth jumps and like depth drops and stuff like that, and like drop jumps personally. But I do actually quite like still doing like repeat kind of jump efforts and stuff like that.
Yeah. So would you also use maybe like pogos, ankle hops, I don't know, various like extensive, even maybe like hurdles, smaller hurdle hops and stuff like that too?
Yeah, still a big fan of pogos.
Okay.
Do a big fan of pogos like early in camp as well. But especially extensive, just from that like tendon and Achilles health, that forces that lower shank against the vibe with that eccentric loading and stuff like that as well.
Nice. Okay, no, that clears this up. I guess for anyone listening as well, obviously, like I guess most people listening probably do some form of plyometric, whether that's pogos or maybe repeated jumps. Yeah. I guess maybe to clarify for everyone as well, like not all jumps are plyometric. So if you're doing things like box jumps, technically it's not plyometric because the ground contact time is too long. But obviously, they're often used interchangeably as strength power exercises. So kind of lump them that way. But same thing with your jump training. I think it's relatively underutilized within combat athletes, unless they put it into a circuit.
I think underutilized in most sports in general.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially loaded. I think people are almost afraid of loading them, whether that's maybe because it's on the back and maybe people are scared of loading it on the back. But like, I don't know. I'm sure you probably hadn't had a problem with it. I haven't ever had a problem with loading something on the back.
Or just like we'll grab a trap bar then, or grab 2 dumbbells.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Do you want to maybe dive a little bit into those oscillatory isometrics? I've had Graham Morris on the podcast talk about them and mention them. I think Gavin must have talked about them on the podcast. I've had a couple of other guys talk about oscillatory isometrics, kind of why they use them and how they use them. Do you want to maybe just dive into a little bit of, how and why?
So a big thing for me is like I said earlier, is like the interaction with the floor and producing force to the floor at a very high rate of speed and cutting that kind of like joint range of motion off too. Like we're not going no deep range in that position, kind of just moving quick as possible. I want to say it's some over Kashanti work where they call it like kind of like a lactate time set. So I'll tend to kind of do it in that kind of manner where it's like 6 seconds as fast as you can. And then we'll rest for like a minute, and you're repeating that. Big reason for why for me is that it's very low stress on joints and things like that because of the angles that you're working in. It's not heavy. It's enough eccentric load to make you move down fast and have to reverse out of it, but not so much that you're going to be sore from it. Essentially, and I'm big into using it as that kind of end stage, closer to the end of fight camp. I've used it a bit in like other sports as well, like rugby. We do it right before first game. It's like that. And so that's kind of my biggest kind of piece of reason and why. And then the how, I've yet to use it on anyone who's like potentially well trained. So I don't know how valuable it would be. Because I just don't have anybody who has a breadth of training age. Like, well, I know Waylon does with someone like Alan and Corey McKenna, who like he's been training them for like 5+ years. And so exactly. But I'm definitely a huge fan of them for that reason of low stress from an eccentric loading perspective and the side of like soreness and just overall fatigue going forward, but also still getting a high level of constant output, moving at a fast rate without having to do things like pogos, like high intensity pogos or high intensity jumps or drop jumps. And I'm just like, you just don't interact with the floor that way within the sport. Also, less of a teaching too, like that, like the barrier of entry for teaching it. Teaching someone do a death jump 2 weeks before a fight, this doesn't seem like a great idea to me. Unless it's done before.
Yeah, blowing knees and ankles for sure. So I guess an example, a used example is the oscillatory split squat. So if anyone goes back to the Graham Morris, I think I put a link in the description of it where essentially someone's got a belt around, a band is pulling them down, they're supporting themselves with their hands and just moving up and down. What's the range of motion that you're kind of looking at when you're doing the oscillatory split? Are you looking at maybe just doing like the top portion or maybe just the bottom portion, or are you ever doing like the whole movement as an oscillatory, or is that too big?
I tend to go top portion and like kind of middle. I haven't tried it with like using the entire range of motion movement. I think there probably is some value in it. I think especially depending if you have maybe if someone's probably more grapple dominant, there's probably a lot of value in that because they're working from low positions more than likely. That's going to be where they're going to be stronger, but you have to produce a lot of force set very quickly. But yeah, I tend to just go top position and like kind of like mid.
Yeah. Okay. And that'll be like for essential, like, even if you're doing oscillatory, like bench, row, whatever it is you're looking at, essentially end ranges of motion mainly. Okay. Yeah. Is that mainly because of, I guess, where most fighting actions occur?
Yeah, so that extended ranges of motion and being able to produce force quickly in that extended ranges, whether it be punches, kicks, things like that, because you spend so much time at that extended range, and that's where you're not going to be isometrically, not going to be very strong there. But if we can have you moving very fast at those end ranges, where you just snap an arm back, snap your elbow back, pull your leg back. That's kind of what we want. Just easier to protect yourself when your arm or leg is back under you.
Yeah, for sure. Are you using, I guess, any form of isometric training, I guess, within your training regimes for fighters, whether that's long duration stuff, maybe overcoming isometrics, other yielding isometrics, anything that you like to use with fighters that you found valuable?
There's some stuff I want to play around with, but nothing I've done some long duration stuff like outside of camp, almost more for like a joint fascia kind of Kennell perspective, like just holding long positions for 2-3 minutes and kind of teach and kind of create new patterns of motion.
Damn, 2-3 minutes is that's killer. I've done 90 seconds max, and I'm like,
but I haven't. Stuff I've seen, I want to play around with. That I've talked to like Graham about, Waylon about and stuff, but then I've actually tried it on a program. So if I tried on myself for some overcoming stuff, I've tried stuff for like I think Graham might have posted this where the guy had the med ball against the rack as overcoming. It was pulled basically work on it at time.
For the clinch.
And so stuff like that I want to try, but I just haven't tried yet. Anyone. I have to play around a little bit on myself. Maybe it'll help my shitty clinch game as it is.
That's right. How long have you been doing Muay Thai now?
3 years now. I think I've been bad at it for I don't know what date is. What date is it?
3 years.
Probably about 3 years. every time I think like I'm like
I know that feeling.
I'm all right. Then like crew like our coach just be like, TK, what happened? Why you were good yesterday? You shit today? What changed?
Oh man, is there anything you've learned maybe going into Muay Thai as a new sport? Because obviously the people listeners might also be looking to expand their martial arts repertoire. Maybe they enjoy grappling, but they want to start striking. I guess anything you learned to maybe go into it that maybe helped you not get injured, not burn out, enjoy the process.
I think probably from my physical perspective, I think the biggest thing I learned was like how it almost reiterated what kind of like you and I probably both seen in like other sports is that how important tissue tolerance, how much task specificity and tissue tolerance are aligned. And I'm someone like I'll run 2 times a week. I'll fucking hop on a bike, go for walks all the time, things like that. But like the first 2 months of Muay Thai, my feet and calves and shit were so fucking sore. And like I'm run, I sprint, fucking jump, I fucking bound. How feet? So then it's like, oh yeah, because I don't do this. Like I never done this thing, and I'm also doing on a now soft surface as opposed to a hard surface. And then my feet have to do more work to stay balanced. And stuff like that. So I'll say that's probably like if I reiterate that thing of tissue tolerance is task specific as well. And then the same thing with even like a conditioning perspective as well, just being like, oh, so like a pretty good heart rate, do decent amount of conditioning on my own, so like that, then they're fucking dying. Like, I'm fighting for my life. I'm like, man, but same thing. It's like, oh yeah, because it's the task. The task I do regularly is not Muay Thai, and now it's like, oh, now I'm punching and kicking people. And also, apparently, and I had to learn very quickly, every punch and kick can't be the hardest one you throw every single time because you won't stay on very long. And I think from like a mental perspective is that this level of like you have to relearn I mean, some people think maybe I need this as well. Like you relearn to be, that's okay to be bad at shit. And it's like, that's kind of a big reason why I joined. Like I knew I wanted to do something that wasn't lifting weights, that wasn't sprinting, wasn't jumping. I was like, I've been doing this for years. Like I was like, it was boring to me. I wasn't playing rugby anymore. Wasn't really playing. Like, I play pick up basketball every now and then. But that's about it. And I was like, okay, I want to actually like try something, like actually difficult. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll do. I've always liked watching. I would watch K1. I used to always like watching fucking I'd race Cepho, stuff like that, in K1 and Pride. So
yeah.
I was like, Al was one of my favorite fighters as well growing up. So I was like, oh, let's find Muay Thai gym. There happened to be one like a couple miles from my house. And I joined it. I joined it right away. I'm like, I don't need a trial class. Man, here's my money. Let's do it. Like, and then it's like, got it in. Like, fell in love with it right away. It probably helped as well that I did Taekwondo as a kid for like 12 years. Like, the Taekwondo until I was like 18 or 19. And then,
oh wow.
And so then I just like, so I think there was that aspect of being like, hey, this isn't like it's not a thing you're going towards. You're not working towards. I'm not working in a fucking fight in glory. Like, they're just being like, oh, it's no end goal. There's no like belt system. Like, I don't need a belt. I don't need a trophy. Like, I don't need to. Like, I just want to like constantly get better. I literally sometimes I'll just tell myself like, oh, we're gonna work on today. I'm just like, man, I'm just trying to be a little bit less shit today than I was yesterday. Like, that's pretty much it. And taking that kind of approach, and also there's all and to be fair, there's probably fair people within our profession that probably need this. That like you realize they're like, oh yeah, just because like just because you're a bigger dude or like stronger doesn't mean you're not a fucking fight. Like, so it's definitely that aspect. Like, sure. we didn't get beat up by a 150-pound man who's 5'4", and you're like, he kicked my ass. He wasn't even trying.
Yeah, for sure. I think most people experience that have come into any martial art, striking, grappling. I guess the first time you go into your first grappling class and you think you're fit, and then like a minute in you're just dead. You got someone lying on you, spazzing out maybe, whatever's happening, and you're just done.
I tried to do it a fair amount of times. Like, never really fell in love with that as much, but yeah, you definitely realize like, oh man, like this person could kill me right now. Like,
yeah, for sure. So how did you then balance your strength training and other conditioning when you started Muay Thai? Did you change anything on that side? Did you scale back or
I
maintain
heavily
what you
scaled back my own lifting. I was always like a 3-time a week person anyway, so I don't respond super well to a lot of volume of lifting. So that I cut it back to 3. I don't really go above 3 pretty much, and then I cut back my general volume quite a lot. So the point I do 4 to 5 exercises. Like, I'm in and out. Like, I'm gonna lift takes fucking 35 minutes if I warm up. If I don't warm up, it takes 35 minutes. Like, I'm in and out. Like, be a bit more like intentional because of my lifting, and then from a conditioning aspect, I did a pretty long block, probably did 8 months or so of like steady, like a real like high intensity kind of threshold work to get, just because I think maybe it could be a genetic thing, I don't know. But like, I was not as comfortable, and I struggled a lot. I was in that higher intensity kind of conditioning again, that like orange and red zone. Like, I get up there, then I'm fucking in a tank afterwards. So get a good breath work of that, but also on the opposite end of the spectrum, like, train high, train low. Like, would do 35, 40, 50 minutes of just steady state, like blue zone work in a heart rate. Like, the long, slow, boring. Like, to me, I always go with, and my boy Andy Ryland says, it's like, that's the real mental toughness is getting on a bike or a Stairmaster or elliptical or like an incline treadmill or a rower, and like, I'm going to be here for the next 45 minutes, and I'm not going to go very fast.
Yeah. Exactly. You sit there bored out of your brains. Take you about 15, 20 minutes to start, and you can just start sweating, and then you're still sitting there, your ass is getting sore sitting on the seat. Oh yeah, I've been through that, but it does pay off. Even though we can call it non-specific conditioning, especially if you're coming into a sport that you're relatively new to. Everything kind of transfers over. So if anyone's listening is maybe starting something, a beginner, or been doing this sport not too long, stuff like that can definitely help.
Another big part too is like, I mean, this sounds fucking just so cliche, but like it is truly like a process, like with martial arts, because like you're gonna be bad to average for like a long time. Anything like jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, people are like, I have a buddy who owns a jiu-jitsu gym back in Texas, and he says all the time people will call him, but yeah, we want to get a black belt. And he's like, okay, so you're gonna start coming for the next 15 years, great. Glad we got your commitment.
Yeah. That's good lifetime value of a customer there if they stay. But as you know, what the statistic is, all the most blue belts quit. Get your blue belt. Yeah, but I can't remember what it was. But essentially, most people, I don't know where these stats are from, so I'm probably quoting some bullshit. But most people get to blue belt and then they stop at blue belt. Get the blue belt done. At that point.
It's similar. I say like with personal training. I mean, like SNC's probably really gotten to that point as well. Like, no, we'll just say that personal trainers, most personal trainers quit within 5 years, something like that. They say. I think they say it's similar. Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe you're doing the same thing with stats too.
Don't quote me on this. I just saw that on Twitter.
Yeah,
and I just ran with it as truth. I'm like, I don't care enough to look that up, but I'm glad it sounds about right. Yeah, the coaching industry can be brutal. I mean, most people eventually end up doing their own thing or changing professions completely. Not SSC coaches in the past 6 months that I know, not know super well, but I know that I've either left industry altogether when I've worked for an equipment company, or they like work for, at least in the US, like work for an equipment company like a Hammer Strength or stuff like that. Like it's actually wild. Fair, like a lot of them. Yeah,
just in the last 6 months,
like go work for Play, Hammer, Store Next, Williams Strength, stuff like that. So they're just like, fuck this, like.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess we're in the profession, so we know what the issues within, experienced most of the issues too, But I think we covered pretty much everything here, TK. Is there anything else you wanted to add? And if not, where can people follow you and find you to see what you're up to?
Something else I really want to add. I would say social media, TK Phys Prep on Twitter. My Twitter is, if you want to learn nothing about SNC, then you follow me on Twitter, because I don't really talk about SNC on my Twitter at all. If you've read my Instagram's not about SNC either. Every now and then I'll sprinkle in, like, share a post or a video or something, like my story. But like, if you want to basically learn nothing else about SNC, do not follow me on social media. Or if you want, the other way around, if you want to learn no new information on SNC, then follow me on social media. But if you come into like want to like learn things, like follow other people, like follow people who like post about SNC. I try to like not post about SNC very much at all. I'm just like I'm there's enough people talking about training. Fucking, there's bunch of people way smarter than me. Like.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to put your Twitter and Instagram in the description anyway for anyone who wants to see what TK's been up to. But thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.